Isaiah. We're going to look at Isaiah 7 through 11. I promise we won't read every verse, but I'm going to give you the big theme of Isaiah 7 through 11. Many people that are defenders of the Christian faith like to proof text, quote mine, and you don't really see the big theme. So I'm trying to give you the big theme. I'm going to proof text it first, and then we're going to backtrack, and I'm going to give you the big picture. So first, we're going to land the plane. We're going to get off. I'm going to be your tour guide. And then we're going to get back in the plane, and we're going to fly around and get the big picture. Cool? All right. Isaiah chapter 7, verse 14. Therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, a virgin will be with child and bear a son, and she will call his name Emmanuel. Critics flock to this passage as though this is the best prophecy in the Bible for Jesus. Remember we talked about the evidential value of prophecy and how it's confusing. They're not all equally weighted. They're all true, but they're not all equally weighted. I would not weight this one very heavily, personally. But I will show you how it does point to Jesus, and properly interpreted, this actually does point to Jesus in a profound way. First, what do we do with this word virgin? A virgin will give birth to a child. Now, can we demonstrate, historically speaking, that Jesus was born of a virgin? Depends what you mean. If you mean in the sense that the New Testament documents in general and the Gospels in particular are very good, well-attested, sound historical documents, then we should take what they say at face value. If you want to go further and actually use modern historical criteria, the criteria of authenticity, we can dig down even further to show the plausibility that what Matthew and Luke write about the virginal conception is actually true. One way to look at this would be that the virginal conception is multiply attested. What this means is that scholars think that Mark wrote first, and then Matthew and Luke copied from Mark, and then some of them think they copied from another source called Q. In my view, I think Q was just the notes of Matthew. So I think Matthew had notes, I think Matthew copied from his notes, and I think Luke copied from Matthew's notes. That's what Papias refers to as the logia. That's a side point. Regardless, scholars think that Matthew and Luke copied from Mark. 97% of Mark is in Matthew and Luke, okay? But there's 235 verses that are in Matthew and Luke that aren't in Mark. So they must have had a common source, or one of them was copying from another. But here's the big picture. Scholars believe that Matthew was writing independent of Luke. So if you have something that's unique to Matthew's writing, that's not Mark, that's a unique source. And if you have something that's unique to Luke's writing that's not Mark, that is a unique source. The virginal conception is in material unique to Luke, and it's in material unique to Matthew. Independent attesting, independent confirmation. I'll go even further. John 8:41, you were born of fornication. Why would they say that of Jesus if he had a dad? We all know the story, the virginal conception. We know what really happened with your mother. Yeah, you were born of fornication. There was no virginal conception. But let's just stick with this. Matthew and Luke both have it. So it's multiply attested. Second, it's embarrassing. Despite what you read on atheistic websites that try and say that the virginal conception was all throughout Greco-Roman literature, and the gospel authors were just copying from the Mithraic cult and all that, that's nonsense. For one, all the sources post-date the time of Christianity. The virginal conception would have been horrifying to read as a Jewish person. In an honor-shame culture, to make up a story of a young woman going away, and she leaves, and then she comes back pregnant before her marriage. It's hard for us to, I know in our culture, there's a lot of promiscuity, and that's normal. A lot of babies out of wedlock, that's normal. Not in this culture. This would have been highly, highly embarrassing, especially when you're saying that this is the Savior of the world who's being born. You don't write it this way. There's also dissimilarity. If it's dissimilar from Judaism, and if it's dissimilar from Greco-Roman religion, where'd you get the idea of the virginal conception? It isn't in the sources. of Mithra. It's not in the sources of Romulus and all that different stuff. We have it in Christianity. This is the origin story of the virginal conception. We do have examples where the gods will go down and have intercourse with a human female concubine. Sometimes this is sexual assault. Sometimes it's consensual. It's always gross, having a god coming down and having sex with a woman, but it's not a virginal conception. So it's not there. In this picture, there's no theophany of God. He doesn't appear. There's no seduction. There's no intercourse. It just says the Holy Spirit will overshadow you, and you will give birth to a child. So it's multiply attested. It's embarrassing. You wouldn't make this up, and it's dissimilar. All right. Some people say, okay, maybe there's good evidence that Jesus was born of a virgin. Now, we don't have video evidence, but that's kind of useless anymore anyways because of deep fakes and everything else. So we wouldn't take that seriously anyways. But we have good historical evidence. Other people will say, well, this can't be predicting a virginal conception because the Hebrew word there in Isaiah 7:14 is alma. And that doesn't refer to a virgin, sorry. If you want a good word for a virgin, you'd use the Hebrew word Bethula. That is a better, if Isaiah meant a virginal conception, that is the word he would use. Not alma. No. This word does not translate as virgin. Actually, no word in the Hebrew Bible translates as virgin. No word translates explicitly or only as virgin. This word here, Bethula, it's cognates, in other languages, so such as the Akkadian, the Egyptian. This refers to sexually active sexually inactive young women. This, in other words, this word used in other cultures referred to young women, both sexually active and non-sexually active. The term is qualified in Genesis chapter 24:16 by, quote, no man had had relations with her. Let me translate that. He is a virgin who has had no sexual relations with a woman. He is a bachelor who is unmarried. Why would you write that? That's a good editor would say, you don't need to write that last part. Bethula just means virgin, so you don't need to say that she didn't have relations because that's what the word means. No, apparently he needed to say she's a young woman who also was a virgin. The word is used for women in Artaxerxes, or rather Xerxes' harem in Esther chapter 2. Those women were not virgins in Xerxes' harem. Hate to break it to you. And it's also used for widows in Joel chapter 1, verse 8. Oh, the critics on this, they just say, oh, no, it's referring to a fiancé and stuff. That word used there for fiancé is husband. That's the way it's used. So these women had husbands who died, and they're called Bethula. This is not referring to virgins. That is not the word that is used. Well, what about that other word, alma? Alma. Does that word in Isaiah 7:14 mean virgin? Yeah, sort of. I'll put it this way. It doesn't not mean virgin. It doesn't not mean virgin. I wouldn't say it explicitly means virgin. I'm not saying that. Michael Brown, he's an expert on Semitic languages out of NYU. He says the term virgin is primarily related to adolescence, being young, not to sexual chastity. Okay? The Septuagint, however, translates alma as parthenos, virgin. It's never used of a married woman in the Hebrew Bible. That should stick out to you right there. For example, when we read the 6 other usages of this word alma, which is translated virgin in Isaiah 7, it always refers to a woman who has not had sex with a man. Genesis 24:43, Rebekah was unmarried. She had not had sex. Exodus 2:8, Miriam was a very young girl. Remember when she helps with Moses. Surely unmarried, hadn't had sex. Psalm 68, the women in the royal procession are called alma. Okay? They're in the royal procession, they're virgins. Song of Songs 1:3, the context is marital purity when it refers to alma. Chapter 6, that's about the only thing, marital purity, yeah. Song of Songs, chapter 6, verse 8, contrasts married women and concubines. That's the contrast being used there. Not referring to sexual promiscuity. In Proverbs chapter 30, contrast Amah with adulteresses in verse 20. So it's always the contrast with married women, with concubines, or with adulteresses. Or it's a really young girl. So I'll put it this way. In the 6 other usages of Alma, the only other usages, it never refers to a young woman who's had sex. So if Isaiah needed a word to pick to describe a virgin woman, that's the word he would use. In other words, this is the best term he could have picked. And I'm going to argue that the context implies a virginal conception. So what does a word mean? It means nothing unless it has a context. We don't know what words mean unless they're in a context. Like the word running. What does the word running mean? Running down the street? No. Running for president? No. Your nose is running? No. Your refrigerator's running? No. Your faucet's running? Yes, that's what I meant, running. Words are only defined by their context. And I'm going to say this is the best word, and in the context, virginal conception makes a whole lot of sense. And she will call his name Emmanuel, or God with us. Now, I want to look at the context to show you why I don't believe this is referring to just any old young woman. Any old young woman. Any young woman. Ready? Let's look at the context. Isaiah chapter 7, verse 1. Ahaz was the king of Judah, 740 BC. King Rezin of Aram and Pekah, son of Remaliah, king of Israel, marched up to fight against Jerusalem. But they could not overpower Jerusalem. Now Ahaz, despicable, wicked, evil king, to win in one of his battles, he thought it would be good before God, 2 Kings chapter 16, to sacrifice his son to win the battle. This guy is a royal loser, not a faithful man at all. And now he's got Aram in the north and Israel in the north coming down on Judah. So he's going to look to the Assyrians for help. I can tell by the blank looks on your faces. You don't know why that's important. Let me show you on a map. So here's Judah, little tiny, dinky little part of the southern kingdom. And then you got Israel, Ephraim in the north, Israel and Judah, civil war, right? Then you got Aram saying, we're with Israel. Ooh, boy. So what are they going to do? Ahaz, the real spiritual giant that he is, he says, why don't we go talk to the Assyrians? The Assyrians? The Assyrians are going to, okay, all right. So you're basically here, what you're doing here is you're appealing to Assyria, almost like if you were Switzerland, and you're like, I got to deal with Benito Mussolini, so I'm going to get Hitler. That's basically the picture here. Instead of just dealing with Israel and Aram, or, trusting God, we're going to go to Assyria. Assyria, they were wicked. They would decapitate people. They would put their heads on spikes to scare the enemies. They would put hooks through their enemies' noses and carry them tens of miles to their prison encampments. Vicious, wicked people. So you're basically making a deal with the devil to fight off these two minuscule nations to the north. Oh, this is so bad. So the house of David was told, house of David, messianic line. House of David is told, Aram has allied itself with Ephraim, Israel. So the hearts of Ahaz and his people were shaken as the trees of the forest are shaken by the wind. Then the Lord said to Isaiah, go out to meet Ahaz. You got to go talk to him and say this to him. Be careful, keep calm, and don't be afraid. Do not lose heart because of these two smoldering stubs of firewood. What's he talking about there? If you've ever been camping, you know what this is. The next morning you wake up out of your tent, you look out and you see the smoldering stumps. They're not a bonfire anymore. They're just kind of smoking, and you can't cook anything on them. And they're kind of smoking, and they're leftover from last night. He's calling these nations two smoldering stumps of firewood. You're worried about that? Are you going to get burned by that? Don't worry about that. Aram, Ephraim, and Remaliah's son have plotted your ruin, saying, let us invade Judah, let us tear it apart and divide it among ourselves. Yet, this is what the sovereign Lord says. That's not going to happen. It will not happen. Within 65 years, Ephraim will be too shattered to be a people. If you do not stand firm in your faith, you will not stand at all. Then the Lord said again to Ahaz, ask for a sign for yourself from the Lord your God. Make it as deep as Sheol or as high as heaven. Ahaz, I get it. You're a wicked son of a gun, okay? I get it. You're faithless. If you don't stand by your faith, you won't stand at all. So I'm saying to you, ask for a sign. What kind of a sign, Lord? Anything. Anything you want. I'm going to give you a sign. You ever heard this from people? Well, if God came down and spoke to me, I believe in him then. Ahaz saying, give me a sign. Anything you want. As low as Sheol, as high as heaven. Ever the spiritual king, Ahaz, he says, oh, Lord, I will not ask because I will not test the Lord. He's citing scripture against God. Deuteronomy 6:16. You shouldn't test the Lord your God. Yeah, you shouldn't test the Lord your God. But when God says, I want to give you a sign, you say, yes, Lord. And you receive the sign, right? So he's saying, I don't want to test the Lord. Oh, quoting scripture. What a hypocrite. This guy is so vile. Then Isaiah has to speak up and he says, listen now again, O house of David. This is a threat on the messianic line. If Aram and Ephraim come through and wipe out the house of David, what happens to Messiah? He's gone, no Messiah. Listen now, O house of David. Is it too slight a thing for you to try the patience of men, that you will try the patience of my God as well? Listen, the Lord himself will give you a sign. I mean, as low as Sheol, as high as heaven, this will be the sign. A young woman's going to give birth. Let me repeat that. As low as Sheol, as high as heaven, a woman is going to have sex with a man, and then 9 months later, there's going to be a baby, and she's going to give birth. That's your sign, so you know everything's cool. Does that make any sense, given the context? Behold, he says, a virgin will be with child and bear a son, and call him Emmanuel. Now there's a sign. There's a sign as low as Sheol or as high as heaven. That's something that would get your attention. But was this fulfilled at the time? Let me put this a different way. Ahaz, I got a great sign for you. What is it? Well, in 740 years, there's going to be this little boy in Bethlehem, and he's going to be virginally conceived. So 3/4 of a millennium from now, with this whole geopolitical problem that you're dealing with, like in about 750 years, there's going to be a virginal conception, and there's your sign. Would that be any encouragement to Ahaz or anyone else? No. I want a sign right now. I want to see something with my own eyes. This is going to happen. This, I would argue, is partially fulfilled in Ahaz's day, but is completely fulfilled in the day of Jesus. So there's this figure. You're like, well, who is that? Maher-shalal-hash-baz. Who's he? Let's keep reading. He, this little boy, will eat curds and honey at the time he knows enough to refuse evil and choose the good. Before the boy will know enough to refuse evil and choose the good, the land whose two kings you dread will be forsaken. Jump forward to 8:3. So it's describing a boy in that time period. 8:3, I approached the prophetess, his wife, and she conceived and she gave birth to a son. Then the Lord said to me, name him Maher-shalal-hash-baz. For before the boy knows how to cry out, my father or my mother, the wealth of Damascus and the spoil of Samaria will be carried away before the king of Assyria. Then it will sweep onto Judah. It will overflow and pass through. It will reach even to the neck, and the spread of its wings will fill the breadth of your land, O Emmanuel. Not referring to the boy, just referring to God, God being with us. Be broken, O peoples, be shattered, and give ear, all remote places of the earth. Gird yourselves, yet be shattered. Gird yourselves, yet be shattered. Devise a plan, but it will be thwarted. State a proposal, but it will not stand, for God is with us. Partially fulfilled in this boy being born, Maher-shalal-hash-baz. How do we know it's only partially fulfilled? For one, we know that Isaiah was speaking about the house of David, this royal line, the Messiah. That's telling us this is some kind of a meta-narrative. Something big is going to happen. This boy is never called Emmanuel. God is called Emmanuel, or generally God is with us. But it says this boy will be called God with us. That's never predicted of this boy or said of this boy. And there is no supernatural birth. That whole context of Isaiah 7 leading up to verse 14, and a prophetess is going to give birth to a son, that's the sign. That is no sign. Some scholars have said, well, it was a 50-50 chance whether it was a boy or a girl, and Isaiah predicted it was a boy. Oh, give me a break. Please. That's the sign. As low as Sheol, as high as heaven. Well, if this isn't fulfilled in Isaiah 8, then who fulfilled it? Keep reading. Isaiah 9. There will be no more gloom for her who is in anguish. In earlier times, he treated the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali with contempt, but later on, he shall make it glorious by the way of the sea on the other side of Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. Oh, so this isn't just about Israel anymore. We're spreading out into the Gentiles. The people who walk in darkness will see a great light. Maybe you've seen that quoted in the New Testament. Verse 6, for a child will be born to us, and a son will be given to us, and the government will rest on his shoulders. His name will be Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. Isaiah 7, there's going to be this incredible sign, and a virgin is going to conceive and give birth to this Emmanuel. And then, well, it's partially fulfilled in this boy, but not really. I mean, it's not about the house of David. There's no supernatural birth. And then we keep reading, and we get into chapter 9, and it says there's something that's going to happen. It's going to reach the Gentiles, and then a child is going to be born. And what is it about this child? Well, it must be Hezekiah, says the critic. Okay. The Egyptians did use these grandiose titles. They'd ramp it up, King of Kings, Lord of Lords, Master of the universe. And then at the end, they'd give the name of the new king. And so scholars have said, well, Isaiah 9, it's the same thing. It's just stealing for the Egyptians. They're trying to build up whoever this king is. But really, we all know it's King Hezekiah, 8th century king. Okay, read K.A. Kitchen on this. He's an Assyriologist. He points out, first of all, no name is given. It doesn't say, Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace, King Hezekiah. There's no big reveal. In fact, there's a conspicuous absence of a name. There's no name for this boy who's going to be called Mighty God. And, Kitchen points out, these titles work really well for the Egyptians, but they work very poorly for the Jews. Because to a Jewish person, it would be the height of idolatry to call a little child, a little boy who is born, Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. Let's go through these here. For one, it's a child who's going to be born. In my view, this is the child of Isaiah 7:14. This is connecting right through. It wasn't fully fulfilled, just partially. The down payment was Meher Shalal Hashbaz. That was for Ahaz and Isaiah. But the fulfillment, like if I was to take a pitcher and fill up my water, maybe I only fill up a couple ounces. That's Meher Shalal Hashbaz. But once we get to the time of Jesus, that thing is being fulfilled or filled full to the brim. And that prophecy is coming true in its completion. These titles, Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace, these are all titles used of God in the book of Isaiah. So for the critic to say, those are just, hyperbolic, I think they're good exaggerations for some king like Hezekiah. You're going to tell me that with a straight face, that this author, Isaiah, in chapters 40 through 48, the battle of the false gods, you don't believe in idols. Isaiah 44, you cut the wood and you make an idol out of it. And then you take the other half of the wood and you cook your dinner with it. That author, he's going to call a little boy the same titles as God, Yahweh God, Mighty God, El Gabor. This is used for God, not God-like. That's a barbarous translation of the Hebrew. This is used of Mighty God, which incidentally is used of God in the next chapter. Chapter 10, verse 21, Yahweh is called Mighty God. Eternal Father, used of Yahweh. Now this could be the creator of eternity, eternal Father, like he's the father of eternity, kind of like how Jabal was the father of those who dwell in tents. Not that he literally was the biological father of everyone who built the tent, but he's the father of the people who built the tent. Yeah, you get the idea. All right. Or this could be the father of eternity in the sense of the father of giving eternity, the father of eternal life. Not that Jesus is the father, he's the son. Hope that makes sense. Prince of Peace, wonderful counselor. I should say Prince of Peace, sorry. Sar Shalom. Used of Yahweh in Isaiah 26, verse 3 and verse 12. He's the one who's going to bring peace on earth. How's he going to do it? Isaiah 53. That's how. This is already lining up for the shot Isaiah is going to make in Isaiah chapter 53. There will be no end to the increase of his government or of peace on the throne of David. There it is again, O house of David, and over his kingdom to establish it and to uphold it with justice and righteousness from then on and forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will accomplish this. Isaiah 7, Isaiah 8, Isaiah 9, Isaiah 11. Then a shoot will spring up from the stem of Jesse. Jesse was the father of David. Yeah, 3 people got that. That's great. The father of David. So Jesse, a stem is going to shoot up from Jesse, and a branch, a nutzer, is going to shoot up from the roots and will bear fruit. The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him. The Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and strength, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. And he will delight in the fear of the Lord, and he will not judge by what his eyes see or make a decision by what his ears hear. But with righteousness he will judge the poor and decide with fairness for the afflicted of the earth. And he will strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he will slay the wicked. Who's this describing? Messiah. Also righteousness will be the belt around his waist, his loins. Faithfulness, the belt around his waist. The wolf will dwell with the lamb, and the leopard will lie down with the young goat, and the calf and the young lion and the fatling together. A little boy will lead them. Also the cow and the bear will graze. Their young will lie down together, and the lion will eat straw like the ox. The nursing child will play by the hole of the cobra, and the weaned child will put his hand on the viper's den. How about that? That's some Hebrew intensification for you. The new child, he'll hang out by the hole, but the weaned child, he's going to be waving his hand inside there like, I dare you. They will not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth will be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. Then in that day, the nations will resort to the root of Jesse, David, Messiah, who will stand as a signal for the peoples. And his resting place will be glorious. Then it will happen on that day that the Lord will again recover the second time of his people from the remnant from Assyria, Egypt, Pathros, Cush, Elam, etc., from the islands of the sea. And he will lift up a standard for the nations and assemble the banished ones of Israel and will gather the dispersed of Judah from the 4 corners of the earth. Matthew cites Isaiah 7, 9, and 11. Here's what my professor taught me, and I'm going to teach you. When the New Testament authors cite an Old Testament text, they're not citing a proof text. What they're doing is they're saying, you're on the internet, and there's a hyperlink. Click that link. If it says the virgin will conceive and give birth to a child, and his name will be Emmanuel, God with us, go back. Don't just read Isaiah 7:14. You read Isaiah 7. And then you read Isaiah 7, 8, 9. And then you read Isaiah 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And then you read Isaiah 7 through, you get the idea. Go back and read the entire context of those citations. Matthew brilliantly, masterfully ties together the messianic theme starting in Isaiah 7 all the way through 9 and into its completion in chapter 11. Beautiful, beautiful.